Oh, I guess we're starting. Good. Okay. So here we go. So I don't know if you guys can hear me yet, but I was just filling time by reading headlines from my email. And I may have discovered a new media form. Now, is it that I can't hear you, Sharita, or?
No, I just hadn't let my unmute happen.
There we go. And so we're just waiting for Mark to join us.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I hear you, indeed. Awesome. Okay. Get that running, got everything running. Okay. So I'll keep an eye on in case we get more people joining us. You never know, could happen. We've had a high of 3 participants now in this course during the online discussion. So it's getting better and better as we go along. So for those of you who are watching the video or listening on audio, this is the discussion session for Module 3 of Ethics, Analytics, and Duty of Care. I'm Stephen Downs. I'm joined by Sharita and Mark, who have been stalwart attendees throughout so far, and quite frankly have as much to do with authoring this course as I do, because without their contributions, this would be a very different looking course. So I'm not really sure where to start. Did you guys? So there were 2 tasks in this week's edition, I guess, of the course. The first one, I saw a bunch of things that were added to add examples or links to the ethical issues. And actually, I found myself adding some ethical issues before even this particular discussion, because I've been doing the slides with the audio, which is taking me a lot longer than I thought it would, but that's okay, because I'm still getting good content out of it, at least to my mind. But I was doing the section on bad actors. And so part of what happens when I do these slides is I look up more resources, because I don't have enough already in my documentation. And I hit on a paper, and let's see, what was it called? I've forgotten what it was called. I have a good memory, but it doesn't last very long. Oh, darn. Make list post. List post. So this is what happens when you're not ready. It was called AI-Enabled Future Crime. It's from the journal Crime Science. And it was pretty comprehensive. So I'm putting a link to that article in today's newsletter, so you'll be able to see the link. And actually, so you don't have to wait, I'll put it right in the chat here. I quite liked the article. Now, a lot of the crime goes beyond the scope of this course, although, pretty much any crime could fit into the scope of this course. So I wasn't sure really where to draw the line, but anyhow, there it is in the chat. But I did like it, and so I thought I'd share. So, and I'll be doing that throughout, the course, adding more posts to the newsletter that I find interesting. And if you guys find anything that you think I should share, send me a note, and because there are good resources and resources that aren't necessarily appearing in the newsletter. So did you find anything of interest in adding the examples to the issues?
Well, I did. I found it quite interesting. I found I was going down a rabbit hole because there are so many things that can pop up, even on page one if you're
Yeah.
searching. So, the last thing that I put in, which is just a few minutes ago, was under anonymity and the Tor browser.
Hmm.
Now, I've used Tor before, for whatever.
Yeah.
But what I found interesting was when I thought about it, I thought about good possibilities for Tor, and then I
Yeah.
thought about bad possibilities. And the gray area in between, such as pirating a movie, right?
Mhm.
Where you can protect yourself using a number of ways. Not that I've ever done that. But so I found that really, really interesting. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go down all of these things and get lost down a rabbit hole. It's fun.
Yeah, that keeps happening to me. Like I couldn't turn down reading and studying this crime studies thing.
Really, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was pretty good. How about you, Mark?
I'm good. Yeah, I have that same rabbit hole problem. But this week I spent most of my time in a different rabbit hole. I did add some resources, but I haven't gotten to the linking part. Um, and that's fine because I'm sort of laying back. I read a couple of Matthias posts. I think that's how he pronounces his name.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to wrap my head around. I mean, I get the concept of the linking, but the doing of it and the purpose of the doing of it and doing it purposefully. So I'm kind of on hold there. I'm in another standard online college class, and this week got completely sucked up by that class.
Mm-hmm.
Which is unusual, but it was a good week. It was one of those kind of open weeks, do kind of what you want. And then, of course, that ruined my week because I spent it down that rabbit hole. So anyway.
Yeah. So how did this course compare with that course? Just like, what was your experience? And I know this is a much smaller course, but I mean, just generically.
Yeah, so this is actually one of my areas of study is online education and particularly learning management systems. I'm actually certified in 3 of them. And this college, Metropolitan State University in Minneapolis, Minnesota, uses a 4th one, Pearson's Brightspace D2L, which is not the best system. And then they don't support their teachers, even though my teacher is tenured faculty. She's not been properly trained.
Mm-hmm.
I hope she never sees this. I like her a lot. And, it's so to compare, navigating your course is no more difficult than navigating hers. And that doesn't mean they're easy to navigate. But she's in probably the most expensive, formerly most widely used system.
Really?
So in my mind, as a student, I should be able to just click forward and just work through the material. She posts a video, she posts an explanation. You might need to jump out to a rubric or something, but I should be able to just click through each week. And so it's actually structured quite a bit like yours in that you have to keep returning to the beginning to then branch from there. And, which is fine. I mean, that's standard these days. But from a user experience, I always look at it from the student user experience. And I've actually yet to experience a course where you could just click straight through the course. Some courses sort of break it into pieces where you can get on a roll and click through the material, but never through 14 weeks. And that to me is, it's an ideal, it's probably undoable, but to me, that's how a course should potentially be structured. And then one advantage your course has is that, one of two that I see is, first of all, of course, there's more agency. Everyone is equal, has equal agency, and that's an ideal that higher education hasn't even stumbled onto yet. I shouldn't say that. I mean, there are certain discussions, but as you know exactly who's talking about it. We can name the 4 or 5 people that are talking about this in North American higher education. And then, of course, I lost my thought there. Oh, and your course does not hide where the course is going. And this is my biggest complaint with most online courses.
Oh, yeah.
They insist on putting each week's module up at a certain time, and that is not student friendly. Because sometimes we get behind, sometimes we have an opportunity to get ahead. Life is not in the metered time signature of tenure faculty.
Yeah, in the case of this course, if it's not up yet, it's because it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah. No, but anybody can click in and see where we're headed.
Yeah.
Even if the content isn't there. See, that's, again, because we're co-constructing it, of course the content isn't there, but at least the map is there. And in this other course I'm in, and in most college online courses, they refuse to show you the map. I don't understand why.
That's strange. Yeah.
Especially because they're accredited. So, how you want to know where a course is going is you go check the accreditation and the course listing in the faculty, the catalog that the faculty has to work from. But how many students even know about that? Only because of years spent in shared governance that I'd even know that exists.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly what I would respond to is you're saying that the person who's teaching the course, is tenured, yet that person may not have had very much training on how to put a course together and or how to teach online.
Exactly.
And this is very prevalent in university. Even back it up, when you teach in a university, who taught you to be a teacher?
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
So
can I tell a really short story? One of the biggest revelations of my college career, returning after the Great Recession of 2008, was in a shared governance meeting where the chancellor and the faculty were going at it. It was a 4-campus community college district, so we had a chancellor and then college presidents and then a faculty senate meeting, I believe. And the chancellor, who had taught in that system in previous decades and then had left and got his EDD and would come back, was in this confrontation with a radical faculty member. And the chancellor said to this member, "Unlike you all, I have a teaching certificate." And I looked at the faculty member next to me and gave him an elbow. I said, "What's he talking about?" And they said, "Oh, well, teachers don't teach us how to teach. We're subject matter experts." And I was just like, "You're kidding me. You mean kindergarten teachers have a teaching certificate, but you don't?" And they're like, "Yep." That was a revelation.
And it's an issue that's been raised before by, for example, Tony Bates, who has argued at length that all college and university professors should have required courses in how to teach, ideally as part of their PhD. I have mixed feelings about that because somebody becomes a professor of physics, not so much because they want to teach physics, but because they want to do physics research. And so, it sort of goes against, good pedagogy to force somebody to learn something they don't want to learn, at least to my mind. I know even though it's a requirement of the job that they actually know how to do this sort of stuff. So I'm of mixed feelings on that.
On the other hand, as a consumer of higher education,
Mhm.
I would wonder why there wouldn't be a practicum included before setting a researcher loose in a classroom. We don't let doctors come out of the classroom and into the operating room, or airline pilots out of the simulator and into the cockpit. And I would argue that teaching is an equally serious, professional job.
I'm thinking, though, that a professor, a researcher in some subject probably ought to be viewed as a resource rather than as the designer of the learning, because they're not going to pick up how to do it in just a few courses anyways. I think the analogy might be, we don't want aircraft engineers to pilot aircraft, not because they haven't been trained in how to pilot aircraft, but because really that's not what they do. They design aircraft, they don't pilot them. We have separate people to pilot them. And these separate people need to know something about the airplane, but they don't need to know how to build one. How's that for an analogy? Is that working?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of it's probably apocryphal, but apparently you used to have to be able to build a car to get a driver's license in Russia. I still don't believe that was true, but that was the story in the Soviet Union, excuse me.
Yeah.
That in the Soviet Union, you had to demonstrate mechanical capabilities before getting a driver's license.
I could believe that part of it, the mechanical capabilities part, because they didn't want you abandoning the car in the middle of the road just because you couldn't fix it.
I think what you just said, though, points to my abandoned favorite word, because you can only use a favorite word so much, the affordance of digital education. Is that, and this refers to our conversation earlier in the week, Stephen, that if you have a learning technologist, a learning designer, working in tandem with a subject matter expert, then you're going to get the good course. The students are going to get the better learning outcome. The institution's going to have a better reputation, have a better product and then better reputation, and then better enrollment, blah, blah, blah. So I think we're headed in that direction, except for the resources problem.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's probably true. Yeah.
That's, to me, the main thing. And yet, now that we've hired, 10 times the administrators there used to be 3 decades ago, those people should be looking at cutting costs in other ways than reducing faculty to find the resources, like cutting themselves out and putting those resources to increase support for faculty.
So the holy grail, to bring us back to our topic, of all of this is supposed to be artificial intelligence. But it's not obvious that this is easily possible. One of the it's interesting. One of the bad actor things that I was doing just before this session was misrepresentation, where you have a snake oil salesman basically coming along and saying, AI can do all of this and you should invest in it. And, I can think of some of these LMS systems that bought into some of these AI systems and made their inventors rich, but didn't really add very much capacity to their LMS. That bothers me. So.
Your holy grail characterization makes me think by adding AI to a learning designer and a subject matter expert, you would have your trinity of distance education. So in particular, distance education, right? Where people are not gathering in a room or around a fire, but are mediated, that perhaps those three elements would be the best mediated experience.
I would be interested in the debate between those three elements, because each of those elements, in a way, has a different purpose, a different lens on how they see the task. Here I am referring to an artificial intelligence as an entity, but that
it's okay. It's
has a lens.
2021. You can do that.
Yeah, that entity has a perspective and a lens. The instructional designer has a perspective and a lens. They may never have taught anybody anything. And that comes out when they try to teach the subject expert how to use the technology. So I'd love to see the debate. I think it would be a great triumvirate.
Yeah.
The debate would be really interesting. The learning designer may say, no, we don't need that. We don't need that. We can make this happen like this. And AI may say, but I can predict that X will happen. And, the teacher or the prof might say, you have no idea where I could go with this.
Yeah.
But if it was networked, interactive, and with feedback loops, I think that Trinity could really create a new way of teaching and learning.
I think it would be extremely interesting.
And I always advocate for another piece is to put the students in there too.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so then now we've got the quadraphonic learning environment.
Yes.
It's now the unholy trinity.
Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah. And then to be able to hold that, and that's what an institution is for, right? So maybe an institution primary focus isn't mowing the lawns and keeping the pool clean. Maybe the institution's primary purpose should be to hold a space where something like this could assemble, reflect, improve, grow,
So do you want the AI to be a participant in the discussion or a mediator?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Can we have two?
A/B testing. There you go.
Can we have two? One's a moderator, okay, and one is a discussant.
Hey Siri, what do you think about this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I just had a flash of irrelevant responses coming from Siri.
Yeah.
The temperature today is 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then what's the backgrounding, back something, whatever it is that the AI does to improve its responses.
Yeah.
Just reading about that this morning.
The other thing, and this is part of the reason why I'm doing everything in this course, even though it's stupid, is actually making the decisions. When you have multiple people, having a say. And I've worked with teams, both of developers and instructors and all of that. And here I am putting on my professor hat, even though I'm not one. I've got a pretty good idea where I want this to go. And most of my experience working with these teams is failing to convince them that it should go in that direction. And now I can imagine having to argue with an AI that should go in that direction. and
Keeps
being
giving you
overruled.
time and temperature. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there might have to be some rules in the teams.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of existing rules in education.
Mhm.
So again, back to accreditation and course, as professors or people who play them on YouTube, I can't think of the name of that document that an instructor has to conform to, the document that was submitted for accreditation of that course. There's a name I can't think of, that all accredited courses have to claim that they conform to the intentions and the outcomes in the accreditation document of that course. I can't think of the proper.
I never did that.
I never did that.
Interesting. Well, yes, because by the time a faculty member is assigned a course, that's forgotten about, but it exists. It's in that space between the institution and the accrediting agency. It's in that space, and professors, again, never educated about that part of the system. And of course, they would resist the suggestion that their course conform to it. But the administration has to be able to defend that if questions about accreditation come up. I've been in some accreditation battles. In fact, I'm in one right now with a small.
My experience is that I developed 4 courses from scratch. And I had to put in certain things like you can't have, all the grades happening at the end. You can't have something 100%, the really little itsy bit pieces. You provide a syllabus the first time you do it. You'll always change that, and you put all of this stuff in to, an advisory committee, and they rubber stamp it.
Yeah, I know. See, I learned these things through shared governance, through endless meetings.
Yeah.
As a student representative.
Yeah.
And I had the time, and most students don't. But yeah, it was interesting. And it occurs to me also, I'm an American, you are both Canadian, correct?
Right.
And so I'm speaking about an American experience in California.
Right.
So that's a particular accreditation agency in a particular state.
Yeah.
So I realize that. But I'm guessing that if you dug around, because your institutions are also accredited, but I'm not aware of how your accreditation agencies are structured, if they're different or the same as we have regional accreditation agencies in the United States.
I think we do too. I would
imagine they're provincial in your case. Then also there are a couple of now federally approved, since the federal government has gotten into education, only recently, only since the first Bush, I think, presidency. Before that, the federal government was completely out of education, but they have become involved, and so there are a couple now of national accreditation agencies, which are particularly handy for online education.
I think it can be a good thing, and I think it can be a bad thing. Because once you get the rules and accreditation rules too tight, then your ability to change your course or to do something totally radical, like I'm not going to grade. I'm not going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer you all an A. And people who really move forward, well, you get the A+. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to write that down, but I did it. So, an accreditation would basically tell me, no, you're not allowed to do that. Yet that is a better pedagogy than having, flash tests, blah, blah. It's a much better.
Clickers. Oh, those clickers. Glad that went away.
It
So-
hasn't gone everywhere. It's
Well,
still,
that's true. In my experience, it went away, and that's
so again, that's a bad thing and a good thing,
Yeah.
right?
Now,
and so I think
imagine,
you pointed to the tension between what we're doing, which has no rules,
Hmm.
yeah,
and the potential overly structured situation, which is basically how it's operating these days, especially with these top-heavy administrations and all their tasks and rules and reports, data. And so what we're searching for, I think, is a middle way that allows more agency, more creativity,
Mhm.
and yet, offers some structure so that when you move when I move from this class to a different, completely unstructured class, the overlap is going to be very small.
Right.
And so what we're searching for, I think, here is some sort of open framework that a participant, whether they're a subject matter expert or not, can anticipate the way the next course will go based on just this loose thing rather than a highly structured thing. And I
I mean,
think
in
that's
my
what we're working
ideal-
towards.
In my ideal world, we wouldn't actually divide all of this by courses anyways. It would just be the professors would be participating in this overall giant graph, and then people who are studying that would just go from place to place on that graph. And there might be events happening at different times and so on, but you wouldn't be locked into a series of events or anything like that. I don't know if that would be better, but that's kind of what I would prefer. But then I really fall on the no rules side of things. So
The other thing that I would say, although again, this is a bit off topic, is that teaching young children and then high school and then adults is really, really different in terms of how people approach what they learn, how they learn, etc. Once you get into adults who are doing this because they have an interest, because they need a specific skill, because they need an answer for something that they're interested in, you have a totally different student. And one where I think the more open way of doing things is really better, because adults learn what they want to learn, right? I mean,
And they don't learn what they don't want to learn.
yeah,
no, they don't.
and they can be really stubborn about it.
Yeah, I still have some mandatory courses that NRC wants me to take, and they're only half-hour courses, but they've been sitting in the hopper for several months now. Yeah.
Proving my point.
Yeah.
So I use 3 different words for these different types of learners, and I promote the last one. I'll get to it in a second, but it hasn't caught on yet. But anyway, so you have pedagogy, and that's developmental learning. I mean, that's a perfect word for it. And whether it takes 6 years or 8 years or 12 years, there's some discussion around that. I hearken back to, I'm old, my parents were old when they had me, and their parents were old when they had them. So back to my grandparents, had very little education, formal education. They weren't stupid, they weren't ignorant, they weren't uneducated. So, a case can be made that we have almost too much education in some ways. But anyway, that's pedagogy. Then there's andragogy, adult learning. But, that's more task-oriented, that's more careerist. It's a long literature, it's almost 100 years old.
No, you have to, in that, put also, I don't know, I don't have a word for it, but it's not everybody's interested in a skill. not everybody is interested in learning something for a career. What
Mhm.
happens with adults is they're often interested in learning something just because they're interested in learning something, or they wouldn't be there. And
That's the
that's,
third word.
yeah,
I
that's,
have that word.
you have that word. What is it?
It comes from Australia, and
Yeah,
it's only probably 20 years old, so it's a brand new word. Pedagogy.
Yeah.
H-E-U.
yes, I've seen that. Yes.
G-O-G-Y. And that is the self-directed adult learning.
Yeah.
And that's different than the andragogy. I mean, andragogy is a category. And that's
Yes, it is.
that's your adult learning classes, your second language classes at night in high schools. And it's a perfectly good category. In fact, I think that the modern university has somehow slipped out of pedagogy and into andragogy and won't admit it. But then there's pedagogy, and I think that's a great word because it's self-directed is the first part of that. Self-directed. And that's the part that can be open and creative and craft.
So how would AI fit into that?
So, yeah, that's
Facilitator.
I mean,
that's the question I've been thinking of as this conversation has
Yeah,
continued.
so how would it fit into that?
So let's go all the way back, because I was going to ask way back when we were early in this discussion, talking about accreditation and all of that. Imagine we had AIs that monitored the courses and decided that they should be accredited or not accredited, depending on how they were being conducted. What are your thoughts on that?
Who programmed the AI? Is my first question.
Mm-hmm.
And who does it report to?
Mm-hmm.
What if another example I love to bring up amongst educators is the Edinboro University Student Union.
Yeah.
It's an actual union. And it's
Okay.
200 years old, and they own their own building on campus. They have their own funding, their own building,
Mhm.
their own rules. And if the university crosses them, things happen.
Yeah.
Real consequences happen. They also started the Fringe Festival, by the way.
Started the what?
The Fringe Festival, the most
Oh, the
famous
Fringe,
art festival in the
yeah.
world. That came out of that independent student union. So if they own the AI, and if they program the AI, it
There
will
we
be a
go.
very different AI than one purchased from a corporation by the administration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, exactly.
And then missing from that conversation, unfortunately these days, at least in the United States, is the faculty union. They
Yeah.
used to run the universities. They no longer do.
No, and that's true, I think, increasingly around the world.
It looks like it to me, but again,
Yeah.
I'm here in California.
Yeah, and you see a lot of these applications of AI in learning directed toward leading people to specific outcomes.
Yeah.
Usually outcomes related to employment objectives that are determined by, basically a mixture of people in the community who hire people and university administrations and politicians. And it seems to me that raises the issue of whether that really is the appropriate way to use an AI in learning. I don't know if I have it down as one of my issues yet, but just the idea of using the AI to direct people toward a certain end in a system where really we'd like to promote autonomy of some sort, especially at the higher levels.
Yeah, it seems like we're evolving even more towards the German model of sorting people into careers as early as possible, which used to be resisted, at least in California.
Yeah. It's
That
almost
makes me
like
wonder, could we have 3 competing AIs?
we might.
Now we're 6. Or
There were 6. Yeah.
It comes back down to a discussion or a debate, or it would even be a discussion or debate as to what would the benefit be to
Mhm.
any of those entities.
Yeah.
And there would be some kind of tension there. There would have to be some kind of tension there.
Yeah, I would say that it comes down to governance. It's who decides, and it would be an ongoing debate, hopefully annual reviews, updated.
Oh, and does the AI do the annual reviews?
They can submit theirs too, yeah. Theirs would be, more detailed and very long. And the students, I would hope, would be the most critical, and the faculty would hopefully be the most on point. You would hope, on what's needed, what improvements are needed. And then the administrators, they have to keep their eye on the budget. I mean, that is their job. So at least part of it. So it would be an interesting mix, and it would be an interesting meeting. I guess you'd have to color code the speakers of the AI as they sit on the tabletop. I don't know.
Yeah, so
We're headed there. We're going to find out about, maybe not me, but people will eventually find out how this sorts out.
The risk here, and it actually shows up in one of the issues that I was writing about and talking about this week, is that when you let the AI make decisions, now, of course, there's always the requirement to have, as they say, humans in the loop to, affirm the judgment that the AI makes. But what happens is that it becomes kind of a rubber stamp thing. And sure, you have the meeting, but you generally tend to defer to the AI because, it's done all of that work. And you probably can't outsmart it, so you just rubber stamp it, and it ends up being the AI making all the decisions anyways.
Yeah, that's that black box problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the black box. Of course, this machine is smarter than me.
Yeah. Ever try to argue with an ATM?
So perhaps that's the new human purpose.
Yeah.
To monitor the machines.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to what you said just a few moments ago, and that had to do with power.
Hmm.
Who has the power, right? And that's that could be a real slippery slope.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with AI, that could be a real slippery slope. And would AI be more would AI have more of an affinity with more dictators, right? People who amass total control. Okay, I don't know that anybody can do that, but whatever. So would AI have an affinity for that?
Well, that's a good question.
It seems to.
Yeah.
But again, the AI that we've interacted with were built by corporations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Who are hierarchical and concerned with power, primarily.
One could even say that certain of those corporations have the power because they can also very easily influence legislature.
Well,
Imagine
I've been
the
saying
only tool we had.
they own our government.
Mm.
Interesting.
Imagine
Sorry,
the
go
only
ahead, Steve.
tool we had, sorry, Mark, was the Facebook algorithm
Mhm.
for choosing what we hear, what we can say.
Yes.
I think that points to the multiple algorithms.
Mhm.
And then back to power, multiple centers of power. And here I go being American, but dividing power across 3 or 4 sections, not the best way to govern, but perhaps one way to make sure power is not centralized.
Of course, the final end result of that is stalemate.
Yeah, we're living that.
Mhm.
Yeah. But you're not the first to live that either. In ancient Rome, they had clubs that were designated by color: red, blue, green, and I think the other one was yellow. They eventually broke down into 2 factions. I believe they were blue and green. And they would have pitched battles in the streets of Rome. And they, the only thing is, like, they weren't political agencies particularly, but so they were sort of like glorified fan clubs. But the thing is, over time, what happened is all the balanced competition ended up as being like perfectly even, and it all boiled down to just 2 sides. It didn't matter how many you started with. You ended up at 2, and they were perfectly balanced, and you could never get a resolution. Or the stalemate in World War I before new technology emerged, when you had 2 sides that were perfectly balanced, and you couldn't get a resolution. And that's what happens. It's good to have checks and balances, but when they're equal, over time, they progress to a point where you can't get past a disagreement. The US has 3. So in principle, 2 could always outvote the 3rd, but that's not really how it's worked out, because the 3 checks and balances have now become irrelevant. The major political agencies in the US are the 2 political parties. And these 3 areas just become the arena in which those 2 political parties fight against each other, and again, never reach a resolution. That's my observation anyways. And it's a problem in AI too. You have competitive, like, there are neural networks, which are competitive pools, right? And you get your input into the system, and then you allocate that system into different pools of neurons, and they each do their own thing, and then they come back together and fight it out, right? And in one case, and that's there's I have the example of the duck rabbit in one of the slides. In one case, the competitive pool just simply swamps out all other opposition. We might think of that as being similar to how the US reacted to communism, right? No, you can't have that period. We'll move this way. Or alternatively, you get a case where the AI can't make a resolution, can't decide between duck or rabbit, and can't do anything. So it's a design issue. And it's it's a design issue in society, and it's also a design issue, I think, in AI.
Oh.
And it's not clear to me that the methods of resolving it are good methods of resolving it. Yeah, they might be, but
What would be a method of resolving it in terms of AI?
I think having, that's a good question. I would almost say not trying to resolve it if I had to answer that. I mean, I think the problem happens when you try to force the AI into rule-like behavior. Pick one alternative or the other. Pick Republican or Democrat. Pick duck or rabbit.
Right.
And all of these problems are so complex that one or the other is never going to be the correct answer. And
What about a
sometimes
new
one,
species?
sorry?
What about a new species? It's
Yeah.
not a duck or a rabbit.
Yeah, that's just called getting it wrong. Yeah,
Oh, you're treading on dangerous territory there.
yeah, yeah.
I was reading this morning about early AI not being able to distinguish between men and women.
Yeah.
An article about Minsky and Papert. And apparently that's been solved. But then this brings me back to human agency, because I really do believe in human agency and creativity. Because now we have people who facial recognition will not be able to sort
Yeah,
in male and female. It just,
yeah.
they have figured out a way to present themselves in a way that is not binary. And I don't know about you, I run into them online all the time in academic
Yeah.
conferences.
Mhm.
And so there's the creative response to the demand to binary conformity that AI might require.
Yeah.
The humans are like, nope, we'll figure out a way around it. It's, I love the term wicked problems. And that's where this course lives, is inside of a wicked problem. There will be no resolution. There will be no solution. There will just be exploration and building this graph and seeing what that suggests, and then a new iteration next year. And
that's why we're building that graph. I have two things just to bring us to a close. The first thing came up in my thinking as we talked about this. It's almost like contemporary applications of AI in learning are attempting to replicate what Plato proposes in the Republic, where all of your attributes are identified by, in Plato's case, a philosopher king, in our case, an AI, and then you are placed into the right role in society, and that is your role, and that is your lot in life. There have been a lot of objections to the Republic, as you can imagine, and I think similar objections come up when we try to use AI in that way, in order to sort and catalog and categorize and allocate people to their places. Second thing, I just wanted to open briefly the graph exercise, and this is more for the people watching the video than for you guys, but I think it'll still be useful to you as well. So I just want to show how it works.
And that's what I've been waiting for.
Okay, good. So it is.
I plunge in and muck it all up. I thought, let me see how it actually
works. This is something you can't break. So,
yeah, right. Let me
all right. So, okay, so let's go. You should be looking at, sorry, I'm bouncing around a bit here because the stupid sharing thing covers over my tabs. There we go. Right. Okay, you should be seeing the ethics, analytics, and duty of care screen right now.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to go to ethical issues, and I'm going to go to the appropriate task. So add to the graph, and we'll access, I didn't have to make that extra click, but to access the graph tool, click here. And so here it is. Ignore that. Ignore these. I need to take them off, but the way I load the graph right now, that's how it works. So this is more than I wanted to put in a single instance of the graph. But I'm just working with a default file for now, and I'll change up this display a bit. But the idea here is that we're looking at these applications that are on the left, and then these ethical issues that are on the right. And the idea is to ask yourself, what applications raise what ethical issues? And so if you think, for example, suppose you think that dashboards raise the issue of content manipulation. Actually, probably don't, but let's say you did, right? So just click on dashboards, and the description comes up in the right in case you need to refresh yourself. Then press the Alt key, and then click your mouse and drag. And then once you've reached the other point, unclick, and you've drawn a line. That's tricky because I always want to just drag, and that's what happens to me. I will probably change that once I figure out how, so that you just drag the line. But right now, if you just click and drag, you end up moving the thing. And I'll probably flip those, so you have to do Alt-click to move the box, but just click and drag. But right now, that's how it works. So just draw your lines. So we've got dashboard to content manipulation, plagiarism detection to fear and anxiety. I think that is a real one. Plagiarism detection to privacy generally. Yeah, I think that's one. So in the future, I'll just have a few on the left-hand side and a few on the right-hand side. So you're not facing this overwhelming, graph of 100 different elements on each side. So once you're done that, you're happy with the graph as you've drawn it, right click. And that pops up this. Now there is this, you can add a new item. It will save the new item in the information that it sends to the server, but I don't do anything with that. You can also wipe it clean, but then all you've done is wiped it clean. The real thing you want to do is click export. Click export, and the system will take care of the rest for you. It'll tell you your graph was submitted successfully, and it'll list the things that you've added. Click OK, and you're done. It'll take you back to the task. So that's how it works. Now, the way this is going to work, now right now, what it does is it saves what you've done and adds it to the end of a file of links that I'm just building up. But this file of links will be fed back in to the system so that when you click on, say, let's go back to applications of learning analytics, and we can look at each of these applications. So all applications. So let's pick one, plagiarism detection, I think was the one we were using. So right now, oh, we don't even have any articles. I thought I had an article in there. I guess not. But in addition to articles and links, there would be another section underneath that would list the ethical issues that were raised. And so, and it's not just me defining what issues are raised by plagiarism detection, it's all the participants in the course who are defining that, right? And so that builds this interrelationship so that you can explore this issue, you can explore the other factors around this issue. And as an aside, that's really why you can't, I mean, we could, in this course, you could have it go from the beginning all the way through to the end. theoretically that's doable. And, you know, I've done that with some of these next previous things. But because we're building this as a graph, you know, it's the sort of thing where you can just wander through the graph. There is no one path through the graph. Although what I'd like to do is create, you know, a range of different paths so you can experience this differently, or, you know, maybe do something like a click capture or whatever, so that you can go through the course and then the way you went through the course becomes a path for someone else, something like that. As well, the graph that is created, in this case, between the application and the ethical issue, that might be selected once, it might be selected 100 times by different people. And that gives us the possibility of each connection, each link between things as having a weight. And so we can use that in order to highlight the issues that are being selected most often. And you know, if we wanted to highlight parts of the course, or even just highlight the display here, we'd say, you know, well, pick maybe the 5 ethical issues that got the most links here, and that allows us to focus in on those. So that's how it works, and that's what it's intended to do. It's intended to be very easy for you guys, but very powerful. Mark?
Yeah, so just for my own clarification,
Yeah.
The reason you said we can't break it is because you're aggregating these separate graphs, correct? So,
yeah.
So I just want to be clear about that. And then the wipe clear, does that just clear the connections you've made, or does that clear the entire graph?
That'll clear the whole graph, and then you'd
That's
have to
what I was
reload
afraid
it.
of, so
Yeah,
don't
nothing
touch it.
permanent happens to wipe clear. Now, I think, let me just check this. We'll go back to the activity. Whoops.
So what we're doing is we're pulling a copy of the module to wherever it is. Anyway, we're pulling that copy, modifying it, and submitting it to be aggregated.
That's right. Yeah, this is just a copy. Doesn't matter what you do to this.
Right.
So
but if you clear it, that's fine.
Let's wipe it clean. So that's all you've done. But now, if I reload the page,
it'll come back.
So I'm reloading it here, and there it is again. Also, I think, let me just check. I'll draw a line here. Click on the line. Oh, all you can do there is change color. I'd love to add a delete to that, but I don't think there is a delete at the moment. No, there isn't. Just change color. And even that doesn't work very well. Okay, so that's too bad. But you know, it'd be nice to have an edit or delete on this. It's not a huge thing, but it's certainly doable. It's just figuring out how to write the code.
Yeah, and did you ever figure out a way to zoom in and out?
Yeah. So
no.
it's all on one, you know.
Oops. Rats. I did not. Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah, we talked about that somewhere. I think it was on Monday.
I did.
Can you message Matthias or whoever?
I'll ask Matthias if he knows, because it seems to me there is a way.
It's got to be. I mean,
yeah,
so that you can see the whole thing and then zoom in and make your connections and then pull back. And
yeah, that would be a lot better for sure. I mean, you know, does this help maybe?
I don't think so. I think I tried that. Yeah, no.
Yeah, no, all it does is load this intro game. Well, move pan, drop input, add single items, wipe, export, recolor, drag. Yeah, I don't see anything that says change the size.
Yeah, well, yeah, pan is side to side. Zoom,
Yeah.
what we're looking
Yeah.
for is a zoom button.
Yeah. Move, connect, drag, Alt plus drag. Right. What we color, white, add single items. No, yeah. Click this and look right. Okay.
Yeah, so that
Yeah,
would be
so
a
I don't
request.
see anything for scale. And knowing how this works on the back end, that could be a bit difficult, because it uses the web canvas element. And so each one of these boxes is defined with an XY location. And so to zoom it in or out, you'd have to change all of those XY locations and resize the box. Now, it's a computer, it can do that, but writing the software, if that software doesn't exist to do that, writing that software would be a bit tricky. Yeah, I'm not sure how tricky, but it would be, I could easily figure out how to make the boxes bigger and smaller.
Yeah. No, so if you can ping Matthias about that, but I'll just carry
Yeah,
on.
I'll ask him.
Yeah.
There may be a way. If not, I'll just make sure all of our graphs fit inside the box. And then you can change the size of a web page by clicking on Control and using your mouse scroll,
Yeah, but that
which
just
works pretty
changes the
well.
size of the display, but you're still only seeing that one portion.
Yeah.
You're still only seeing that one part. Yeah, and then if you scroll it too big, now you're sort of in trouble. But yeah, you can't see the whole graph if the graph is bigger than the box. That's the problem. Yeah.
That's the problem.
So I hope that helped. And I hope that this is an easy but interesting exercise. That was the intent anyways. And something different that you don't normally do in a course. So any final words before we wrap up the module on ethical issues?
No, I'll
Okay.
I'll just go back down the rabbit hole happily.
Yeah. So there's going to be lots of rabbit holes in the next module. We're looking at ethical codes.
Yeah.
And you guys will be able to benefit by me having gone down a rabbit hole and dug up dozens and dozens and dozens of ethical codes and having run them through an analysis. And yeah, so that'll be a bit of fun, I think, but we'll talk about that starting on Monday.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to wrap up. Only 9 minutes late. That's not too bad. So we'll see you all next week and have a good weekend.
You too.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.